I'm joined now in the Photography Show TV studio by Amy Vitale, who's just been speaking on the Superstage here at the Photography Show, where your presentation was entitled "The Stories We're All Seeking." Now, I had a bit of a sneak preview of some of your images that you were sharing in there, and also elsewhere. It's fascinating work, but tell me about the stories angle and about your approach to finding these stories that you tell so magnificently.
Oh, thank you. Well, I worked in the news industry for probably the first decade of my career, and I was always told what kinds of stories to bring back. Very often they were the most sensationalistic, often violent, sort of the extremes of humanity. And as I covered these things and really spent years going deeply into each story, I realized that at best it was one half the truth, and at worst maybe even a lie, because there's always a story within the story, and there's always these pieces that we leave out that are so essential. I think we have, this news cycle now that really, I think it's essential because the stories we tell ourselves as a society become our reality. And I think right now we have to sort of put the wide lens back on and start looking at a more balanced view of what the world looks like. And yes, you have to talk about the challenges and the problems that exist in this world. But I think it's equally as important to also give us some answers and solutions and looking for a way forward, and not just bringing these tiny little pieces of a much larger story that only focus on the things that divide us, the negative, because again, these are creating the world we live in, and it's not always true, and that's what I've learned.
So you talk about finding the story within the story, or the story around the story. As a photographer, I guess separate to your work as a filmmaker, but as a photographer, when you're talking about bringing these bigger picture views, and you embed yourselves in these stories for years and years at a time, is there a challenge for you when you're creating a single still frame that tries to encompass what is a much bigger story? How on earth do you find a way to tell these much bigger stories with a single image?
Oh, that's a tough question, but yes, I think that those images I'm seeking out not just a beautiful image, it has to have a story. So that's what I'm after. But the thing I've learned is that it takes real time and patience, because so often we go to a place with the story already written in our head. We've read, we've done our research, we think we know what the story is. But the one important thing I've learned is actually do all the research, yes, but also be open for those truths, those universal truths need to be revealed to you. People don't show you those truths right away. It takes time and understanding and trust, and those relationships are essential. And only then, literally it takes years sometimes to get to those kinds of images that really show that message in one image. But there's no easy answer. I do think it's just trust, access, and sheer hard work and patience.
One of your images I was looking at earlier on that moved me the moment I saw it was of somebody dressed as a panda but holding an actual baby panda bear cub. Tell me a bit more about the story, because that's a fascinating story in its own right, as well as the image.
Right. So I spent 3 years, multiple trips over 3 years, digging into what China is doing to save their giant panda from extinction. And actually, when the panda is an ambassador for so many other species too. But the biggest piece of this story for me is habitat. Habitat everywhere. We're losing it at such a rate. And so China is reforesting areas and trying to create more habitat for the panda. But that image is, they're basically training pandas. They pick up very few of them to go back to the wild. So they breed them in captivity, and they're trying to augment existing populations with these captive-born pandas. But after one generation in captivity, they don't know how to survive in the wild. So the reason we're dressed in these panda costumes is because they don't ever want them to be comfortable around human beings. And also I should say those panda costumes are scented with panda urine because they smell more than see. But that is doing a very rare health check. They don't often pick up these pandas that are being trained to go back to the wild. And so it was just this moment where you understand habitat. And I'm always looking for the absurdity in this world we live in. And it's almost absurd, like that I think the most poignant images, there's humor and absurdity and sadness in it all too. Like, what are we doing? And also hope. Hope is really important to me because I think that all of these images have a sense of hope too, because it's not too late, and we can change the course of our destiny if we all kind of think about it a little more.
And I think the question that I asked a moment ago about how on earth can you hope to convey so many different parts to a story in a single image, that's exactly what that image did for me. And you've expressed the absurdity, the hope, the sadness. That was what that one image conveyed so very, very clearly and so strikingly. Before we go, we have a lot of young photographers, emerging photographers who watch the show here, as well as amateurs and professionals alike. A piece of advice from you in terms of breaking away from the conventions, throwing off the shackles of how we've been told a story should be told through imagery. What advice would you have, if you have any, to help photographers to look at things afresh in how they tell a story with their images?
Well, a couple of things. One thing is also, let me say, that's a difficult one. Okay, I think you have to go deep into a story, and that means spending years on one story. So even if you're trying to pay the bills in different ways, do not give up. And it doesn't have to be across the planet. It should be, in a way, in your backyard, something that you can consistently work on, and something that you have access to, because we all have these genuine, things that we have access to that not everybody else does. So sort of figuring out what you care about, what the story is, and just start chipping away at it and spending time on it. And I think, yes, you read everything you can, but talking to people and really listening is more important. Listening to what people tell you, because they will reveal things that are not always in the news. And so getting past those headlines and finding a greater truth. And it just takes time. Again, time and patience and a deep understanding. But also, the thing I wanted to say was, don't make it about you. The story is never, ever about you. And I always see, like, what's your style, your vision. It's not about your style and vision. It's about listening and letting people and the story reveal itself to you. And it's just a hard thing to convey. You just have to, frankly, work. It's sheer hard work.
And it's trust that those stories are going to be there, committing and trust that if you do invest so much time in there, that the story will out, the truth will out, and if you're listening, you will find that.
Yes, the truth will always prevail. And also, the other thing is, it's important to have a diversity of truth. There's no one single truth. It's also understanding diversity and viewpoint is the truth. That is the truth. And we need to hear one another's voices, all of our voices, and then that kind of chips away at the greater truth.
Well, Amy, I'm sure I speak on behalf of many people who are watching just now, but also in the Superstage just now. We've loved hearing your voice here at the Photography Show in Birmingham. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of time here at the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.